Okay, so where we left off was on page 1042 after line 96. So you should listen on your own, and then once you are finished listening, you can come back and watch the analysis video. So after everyone leaves, except for Montague, Lady Montague, and Benvolio, they ask what happened to start this fight over again. Benvolio basically explains everything that happened, and then Lady Montague asks about Romeo here in line 109. Where is Romeo? Benvolio here tells us what Romeo is doing or where he's been. It says, an hour before the worshipped sun peered forth the golden window of the east, a troubled mind drave me to walk abroad. So he's basically saying an hour before the sun rose, he was walking around. Okay, Benvolio was out walking around. And then in line 116, it says, so early walking did I see your son. Okay, so that means that Romeo was also out walking early in the morning. Okay, Romeo did not want to be seen and fled away from Benvolio. So Benvolio let him go. Montague tells us, many a morning hath he there been seen, with tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew. Okay, and then it says that he steals home and private in his chamber pens himself, shuts up his windows and locks fair daylight out. So he has been hiding in his room basically all day, um, being moody, and then late at night goes out and wanders around, but he's basically just staying in his room. Something's going on that's depressing him, that's making him feel sad. Notice we have an allusion here in line 129, the shady curtains from Aurora's bed. So Aurora was the goddess of the dawn. So if we're talking about the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, we are talking about, he's basically saying that we're pulling back the curtains, so we're allowing the dawn to come in. Um, Benvolio asks if Montague knows why Romeo has been sad. He says he doesn't know. He's been asking. He would love to help, but he just doesn't know what's going on. Here's where Romeo enters in line 149. And so Benvolio says, well, hey, I will go and figure out what's been going on with him. So then Benvolio and Romeo have this whole conversation here. And we basically learn that Romeo is out of the favor of the girl that he loves. Okay, he is not in love with Juliet. He hasn't even met Juliet yet, but he is in love with someone else who does not return his feelings. At the top of page 1044, we see Romeo say brawling love, loving hate, heavy lightness, serious vanity, feather of lead, all of these different opposites. Okay, so if you remember from your notes, when we have two words that have opposite meanings, we call those oxymorons. Okay, and what they do is they show us that a character is feeling confused or upset. Okay, so we know that Romeo is feeling sad, upset. Okay, and then we see some more figurative language down here where he says, love is a smoke raised with the fume of sighs, being purged, a fire sparkling lover's eyes, etc., etc. A man is most discreet. These are metaphors to describe love. Okay. So I would probably mark those down on your green sheet somewhere so that you can have that as kind of a cheat sheet for our quizzes and that type of thing. Okay, but then down towards the bottom of this page, we finally figure out what is going on with this girl. So Benvolio asks Romeo to tell him who he loves. Romeo kind of plays dumb. He says, I do love a woman. And Benvolio's like, yeah, I figured that, but who is it? He says, she'll not be hit with Cupid's arrow. She hath Diane's wit. So we know that Cupid is the god of love. So if she won't be hit with Cupid's arrow, she refuses to fall in love. If she has Diane's wit, Diane is the goddess of chastity, sort of like purity or virtue. So she is not interested in entertaining any type of attention from boys or men. Okay. Um, he says here that he has tried to seduce her with loving terms. So just by saying sweet things, he's tried to give her adoring looks, and he has, explained to her how wealthy he is, but she is still not willing to fall in love with him. Okay. So Romeo here, he is all bent out of shape. He's been spending all day and night locked in his room, sad because this girl does not love him. But he really hasn't even done that much to try to get her to love him. Okay, so if we think about what this tells us about Romeo's character traits, this would be like number 19, letter C, I believe, is Romeo. You'd probably want to say something like he is emotional. Okay, maybe a little bit dramatic. Um, he is, he kind of falls in love quickly. Um, he's sort of I don't know. He's always in love with someone and it's, always the end of the world when they don't love him back, that type of thing. Okay, so Benvolio here in line 218 tells him to forget about her. And Romeo basically says, there's no way I could do that. Okay. Benvolio says, let's look at other pretty girls. She's not the only pretty girl in the world, so let's look at some other pretty people instead. And Romeo basically says, there's no way that you could do that, okay? Because anyone that I see who's pretty will just remind me of her because she's even prettier. And this is sort of how the scene ends. Okay, so on your study guide, you should have all of your answers for scene one completed, as well as have character descriptions of Romeo, Benvolio, and Tybalt on the back of your study guide or your green sheet.